Okay, guys, welcome back to the Bunk Bed Podcast. We have Jason and Jack here, and we're going to talk about some stuff today.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. What are we going to talk about?
Throw some out there. Let's get nuts with it.
All right. So we were looking at podcast stuff, things we wanted to talk about, and got social movements, just kind of like past social movements in the United States, recent and like going back to civil rights. So I think it would be appropriate to talk about civil rights first.
Let's do it. Which one?
Which one?
Do you have a specific one or like?
I'm thinking, when I think civil rights, I'm thinking 1950s, late 1950s in America, like Black Civil Rights Movement. I guess there's not much to debate on. Like, it's all pretty much agreed on. Um, just
We,
like,
yeah, we could compare like the BLM to
yeah,
like
yeah,
the MLK kind of thing. Because I know there's a lot of substance at like school. Where you see like a BLM poster, Black Lives Matter, right next to like a Martin Luther King Jr. quote. And it's like, is that really, can you really compare the two?
yeah. Well, I was thinking more of like just success, or like ways that these social movements were like implemented, I guess. Because I think comparatively, I want to think that like the civil rights movement was a lot more organized, and like we have dates, we have like protests, we have, like Supreme Court cases with like Brown versus Board, everything. In like what was it, ref- the tabletop where they like didn't serve to black people and they all sat in
Like,
the lunchtop sit-ins or
it was
whatever
an
they were.
actual thing.
Yeah, so it was a lot less like social media based. I guess, do you think like being in the 1950s, 1960s, and not having that outlet on the internet, do you think like that causes for a more successful movement, like social movement? Or do you think, I mean, obviously it was successful, here we are in 2018, like in hindsight it was successful. Do you think
Hmm.
that's like in today, do you think that would be as effective?
Well, I know today it's a lot easier to do it. Like you said, MLK Jr. could just set up like a Google Doc and just add people like this for a meeting. But I think like this like you could easily talk to people around the world. It could help like actual like movements, but also creates movements that are just have like no substance. Like back then, if you want to have a movement, you need to get the base and go out there and say, okay, this is serious. I feel like nowadays it's like it's just a bunch of people and you have to decide, okay, is this like an actual thing?
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah.
interesting to think about that, because like, how do you think word got around for these different, do you think it was just word of mouth, or like there's like mailing lists or something like that, especially with like the civil rights movement? Because like there was huge protests, and like I know in like Alabama with the Little Rock Central High School, there's huge riots there. I think that's where they like fucking unleashed the dogs and like had like water hoses and stuff. So like there was a lot of people there on both sides. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting to think of like what that could have been, or what it would have been if social media or like internet was a thing. You know?
Yeah, like nowadays, I guess nowadays are different, but like back then, if they would have had like the media and the press they do now, it would be a lot easier to get the message across. But yeah, I guess back then you just have to you'd really like how do I say this? It would have to be word of mouth, a lot of secret underground meetings, and maybe that makes it more authentic. I
Yeah.
mean, not necessarily denouncing things that are going on now, but if you really got it going, like boots on the ground, it was like, okay, this is authentic. Nowadays it's like, all right, well, I want to be part of this feel good thing. And it's like if you're a part of a movement, you're morally correct. So the more like movements you have, the more morally correct or morally bolstered you are. You know?
Yeah, and it seems like a lot more catering to, um, yeah, you can just throw it in your fucking bio. You can just say like hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag whatever. Um, uh, okay, so I guess civil rights movement success for sure. Awesome
We're
movement.
not debating that.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
no, we're just talking about social movements so let's go on
like
here.
modern day ones. Like how does that compare? I know it's not really comparable because, as much as people would like to seem, it's not. We're not in the civil rights movement like compared to back then, but just how does like the media and stuff affect that? You know what I mean?
Well, I think I mean obviously at first glance you want to draw comparisons with Black Lives Matter and but I think like most movements just like I mean I guess like most identity politics movements like LGBTQ movements and I guess gay rights isn't really that was a successful movement and like I think that was needed in America. But like trans rights and like third wave feminism and Black Lives Matter, these are movements where you know you can draw the parallels, but like it I don't know I
It
just
doesn't.
don't they weren't nearly they're not nearly as effective and like I don't know I just think the way they implemented these movements could have been way better, like
Yeah, I think nowadays with like like all the technology, there's more, but it's not as much substance.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you like I said, if you got people back then, it's like okay, this is for real. But now it's like there's a protest for everything, and it's like if you're protesting something, that means by like default, you're protesting something that is bad. That means you are morally correct or morally good.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the people I want to say this. I mean, I have no reason for this to be true, but I feel like I mean, obviously back in the civil rights movement in like the 50s and 60s, these people knew a lot more about what they were talking about, and I think that's because they were literally going through just terrible things. They couldn't vote.
Because it was real.
It was a real issue in America that needed to be resolved. And a lot of the layperson, you know, apolitical people, they were educated on the topic, white or black. I'm sure there was plenty of white people that were for this movement. I hope so.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
and like I feel like there was a lot more education back then because they weren't just kind of watching the news and just kind of spitting out what they heard on the news. It was, kind of like word of mouth and then like just like a lot of conversations going on about it and um, big speeches. Like big speeches were a thing back then, with like MLK's speeches and just I don't know, any big civil rights activist speeches. These things were huge and you gain a lot of knowledge by listening to that kind of stuff. And like that's not so much a thing today. It's kind of more just like personal 140 characters type information that's going on, 5 minute segments on TV shows. So you see a lot more just like what you were saying, like moral outrage.
Yeah, and now I know back then like the speeches were a big like Gettysburg Address, like MLK's speeches, but now with like Twitter and all the rest, anyone can have a speech, and so I think it like dilutes everything. Like it kind of loses its substance.
Yeah.
Whether like the movement or however you name it is like true or not, it's it's like anyone can have a speech. You know what I mean? So I think the media generally it dilutes it. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep. I definitely agree with you. Um, so I guess we're pretty good on that. I guess anything I'll ask you like one thing, like do you think there's any lingering civil rights things that could be righted that, any wrongs that could be righted? I remember I was in like a political theory class this semester and, I read a lot of Karl Marx and like, high capitalist people and then I read people talking about gender and then I read people talking about the actual civil rights movement, and then I read people in like 2004, and like a lot of people. My professor was great, and he was very unbiased in the way he talks about things. So we read. I remember we had two articles one night to read, and one was talking about, they were basically just calling everyone racist and saying America's racist. And then the next one was kind of contrasting with it. They had the same type of mindset, saying that blacks are set behind in society, but they were saying let's not call everyone racist. Let's think about like things we could actually like maybe bring to the Supreme Court, like things that we could legislate to make the experience better. So is there any like wrongs in society that you think could be worked for like maybe a black or a minority?
Well, I think back then, so I know a lot, like today, like BLM, for example, takes a lot of inspiration from MLK, like the actual civil rights movement.
Yep.
And back then, it was, for the most part, it was pretty clear cut. Like, it was black and white. Like, if you're for it, you're not racist. If you're against it, you're racist. And I think that today, that's not really the same. Like, with today, if you disagree, it's like, okay, well, you're racist.
Well, you're like arguing over ghosts. Like back then, you were arguing like we don't need this. We don't need different water fountains. We need to be served at the same fucking restaurant. We need to be in the same area. And now you see people that are fighting for segregation. Like there's blacks, I think in I want to say USC or somewhere, some university in California where they want separate black housing. And they say you want it to like guarantee black housing on the campus and like to have a community. But like if you look at it, it's like it seems just they want to be segregated from whites. Um, so it's just weird to see like back then they were fighting for like actual civil rights, and now we're kind of just calling everyone racist, and it's really hard to defend yourself in that situation, especially if you're not a racist, Because like Republican and racist are like equivalent now today for some reason.
They're synonymous.
Yeah,
They're
we're
basically
all
the same thing.
we're all racist.
Yeah,
It's simple as that.
it's basically who you point the finger to, and if you're on the end of the finger, um,
you're fucked.
you're done. And if you're the one pointing to it, you get excused of all. You're just excused.
Yeah.
And so I think the comparison, which like I'm not saying don't make the comparison, but when you compare it, it's like okay, well back then it was like black. It was like black and white. No pun intended. But now they're trying to do the same thing, and that just doesn't really fly in today's society because it's not that. It's not racist versus not racist. It's okay. Well, we're trying to have a discussion, and you're bringing it back to like civil rights movement, and that really takes away from the actual discussion.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot less discussion willing to be had, and a lot more like what you were saying, pointing fingers, and it's tough because like you know people people are trying on the right. I feel like it's mostly the right that's like being pointed fingers at, having fingers pointed at them. I feel like they're trying their best, people are yelling at them like, there's institutional racism, blah blah blah, and like they're like, which institution? Where are you seeing this? Like, cause both of us, we grew up liberal, and it's
Oh yeah.
not like when you're just 20 years old, 21 years old, you just like, oh, I'm like racist now. Like it's just like we grew up liberal. We grew up being, and I feel like I hope most people are raised to think everyone's equal, and especially in the 21st century, in just 2018, I feel like most children, most young adults are in the same mindset. I think, besides like counties where there's like 40 people graduating from high school, like that might get a little weird. I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but
Yeah, I think like when you're because I know today like the clickbaits and you just want the small clip of like shit's going down. Like that's like what entertains us. Like we're an entertainment culture. You don't want to watch something that's boring. And so when you watch two people having a rational discussion, it's like okay, well left versus
reasonable discussion.
reasonable discussion. Get off the fucking phone. Like, if two people are like, okay, well, I think this and you think that, it's like, all right, well, that's cool and all, but I want to watch the video where some guy screams racist at someone. That's way more entertaining. And then it's like, well, everyone's calling this dude racist, so he must be racist. And I think that really connects to, like, if you're, like, at a movie theater, everyone's kind of chatting with each other, and it's like, okay, well, everyone's chatting. But if someone starts screaming, it's like all eyes on him, just because he's loud and, like entertaining in a sense.
Yeah.
And so I think that really takes the spotlight. And it doesn't have to be, like, reasonable. Like, it doesn't have to be morally correct. It's just whoever's the loudest. And I think that...
Yeah, and, like, you see it... I see it a lot in debates. Like, people will, like, stress, like, just these huge, like, keywords. They're, like, I don't know, like, just these whole host of words that just mean diversity. And, like, they're stressing, like, we need to do this. And it's, like, everyone's like nodding their head like, fuck yeah, like we need to do this. And then like someone will answer back and it's like just as powerful, but like they're not like just like kind of bringing them, they're not like just making themselves huge with it. They're just kind of saying like facts, or they're just saying their opinion, and it may be more correct, or I guess to me, like that I value that opinion more. So like I feel like, especially just like what we were saying with that social media, it's definitely like easy to get swayed to one side just by like how powerful someone's talking, or how, because like a lot of those movements, you're just like kind of agreeing with it. If you're apolitical, you're kind of like, well, it makes sense. I don't want anyone racist in America. Like, people are getting shot in America by cops. Like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I agreed with all that. I was like, yeah, this is crazy. Like I was in Australia when a lot of this Black Lives Matter was taking off, and both my cousin that I went there with and my uncle are super liberal. I don't know about my uncle, but my cousin's like basically a socialist. And my uncle, he seems pretty level-headed with politics, but I remember we were there when the Dallas shootings happened. You remember that?
Yeah.
And he's like, fuck, America's like literally in a war. He thought like America was having another civil war. Like, I swear to God, he said that. And I was like, Jesus, are we? And like, if you're apolitical, you just hear all that and you're like, fuck, this is crazy. Like, cops are just killing people. And it's easy to get pulled into that. And then you're kind of already on the left, just with how things are happening.
Yeah, I think that goes a lot back to like we want to hear, like, we're an entertainment culture. We want to hear something loud and entertaining rather than like something boring and like mundane. And I think a lot of what we do with today's like movements is you say something that everyone agrees on, and then you do a therefore. So you say like, we need to stop racists are bad, and it's like, okay, yeah, everyone's not. It's like, yeah, we agree. And then they make the bridge, but they like mask the bridge up like it's under like mist, and therefore these people are racist. And so it's hard to see where like actually like reality turns into like subjectiveness.
Yeah.
So it's like, racism bad, we need to stop racism. Everyone's like, yeah, everyone's against racism except for like a dozen people out, like in the US. And then they make the therefore, and then it's hard to because if you are against the therefore after like something everyone agrees on, it's like you disagree on what everyone agrees on.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really hard to combat. I think it's a conversation that people need to have, where it's like, how do we actually point out like what, like how do we actually point out what like is truth? Like, we can all agree on something, but therefore the bridge to therefore is like, it can be a slippery slope, and we see that with a lot of like deplatforming today.
It definitely is. I definitely agree with you. Okay, so we did that civil rights. I think we could kind of think about some other social movements here. Gay rights. I'm looking at a list right now on Wikipedia. We got the gay rights movement. I feel like, well, we could talk about it. I feel like there's not much to discuss here. I think, if we were religious, maybe there could be something to discuss, maybe with like religious freedom, what is it, the First Amendment. But I think we kind of agree on that. So let's talk about either feminist movement, like first, third, second wave, or we could just kind of dive more deep onto Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I think feminist or feminism, it isn't just one brand. It's the postmodern feminism, which is what you see today. The crazy blue haired nuts who have like it's just not reality. And then the factual feminist, where it's like, okay, well, you know, like we like cherish women and like the like what women care about. But then you do the therefore where it's like it just goes too far, and I think you can't just say like feminism. You have to clarify because like the postmodern feminism versus the factual feminism, there's a huge difference, and they're like completely opposing, and that's what's it's really hard to distinguish that in like especially in today's culture where it's like a quick 30-second clip. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, um, I think a lot of feminism today is just kind of playing into identity politics, and they're kind of just they're I don't know, like I don't and just what we were saying with like the Black Lives Matter and how it's easy to get sucked into thinking like, well, I want more equality, equal rights for women. I want more women as CEOs, and it's like, yeah, I definitely do. I want to see more women bosses or women running these large companies, but it's hard to agree with that when it's like we've had equal opportunity. Like equality of opportunity is not a new thing in America. And like if we start talking about equality of outcome, that's a whole different thing, like with going into just like equity. I think I know Jordan Peterson talks a lot about these Scandinavian countries that have gone the furthest and furthest for equality of gender, and they have the most egalitarian societies that are in the world, and the gender differences in uh, occupation have gotten way worse. Like there's more women in nursing, and there's like more men in this, and I feel like equality of outcome is not what we need.
Yeah, I think like when you hear equality, it's like yeah, like you go back to the nodding. It's like yeah, everyone's for equality, but equality at face value isn't like always correct. Like women are better nurturers. I'd rather have a woman. I mean, maybe it's because I'm a man, but like I'd rather have a woman taking care of me than like some guy. And like men are probably better at military, and I just forced equality, and that's like a big thing. Like diversity, here diversity, diversity. It's like yeah, that's like all fine and dandy, but when you force it, that has a lot more consequences than than benefits. You know what I mean? Like with Canada, they're forcing like they have at least half women in their like political system. It's like at face value, that's like all fine, but it's based on merits and it's not discriminatory. It's like okay, well, who's best for the job? Okay, well, it's a woman. Great, you know, equality. But if it's a man, it's like, okay, well, where are the women? And it's like, no, it's based on merits. And when, like, for example, if more men have more merits in a certain field, and then on the flip side, if more women have more merits in that field, it's viewed as bad. Like, where's the equality in like sanitation? It's like they really.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think in today's political world, especially on the far left, there's a lot of picking and choosing, and I think
Yeah,
we need
like
to realize.
they want to be equal with the CEOs, but they don't want to be equal with like crab fishermen. Where
And like
like
cleaning up shit.
yeah, and like they don't want to be equal with firefighters or I mean, I'm not saying they don't want to be equal. That's definitely not okay to say. There's definitely probably some people that would women that would value those jobs, and maybe that they can't get them because they are a woman. I definitely think that that's out there. I bet you there's some women that want to be crab fishermen and that they want to be in sanitation, I guess. I don't think there's many men that want to do that. It's not really a highly coveted job, but I think there is some sexism in society. I think it's for sure. There's definitely sexism against women. I think there's more sexism against women in the workplace than men. And I think in society, just in general, there's more sexism against men with like I don't want to say that. That's
No, I mean it
but
kind
like
of
with
is.
like divorce and like getting children, and just like they have higher sentencing for like crime. Um, if you include rape statistics for jail, men get raped more than women, which is crazy to think.
But you can't say that. That doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean, like I wanna that kind of whenever I say that or think about that stat, I kind of just like be like, it's kind of like not a stat that because I've never been to jail. I don't know what that would be like. I assume terrible, and I
Rape?
just yeah, just
Rape's pretty bad.
from
Everyone agree on that.
from what I've heard, but yeah. So I
Did some
think
research.
I think there's definitely sexism, and it's hard to think that um there's going to be any government policy that could help. I don't think many people are fighting for government policy. I think even going back to Black Lives Matter, I don't think there's really anything at this point that government policy can solve. These movements are just kind of fighting for social awareness. They're just kind of being like, hey, look at this. This is, not equal. This equity is not right. Um, so I think most of these people are coming from a good place, but I don't think they understand the full scope of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think face value is a big thing in today's culture, and equality is not always correct. Like myself and Jeff Bezos, we have a lot of inequality, but I'm not bitching and moaning, and that's not to shut down like the true inequality, but
Sure.
I think it's like we ran out of fire to put out, and so we're making our own fires.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, where's this? Okay, well, then we have to create it. And it's like, well, look, there it is. It is. It's like, well, you created it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
And
So I'm looking at the Wikipedia page here for like just feminist movement. They don't really have it broken up into anything like time wise, like the first and third.
does it seem jumbled?
It does.
That
It
that
does.
probably means it's not.
Not that concise of a movement. Um, I know I know the civil rights one had like fucking full dates and everything, but anyways, here's a statistic that I kind of want to get out there, I guess, and get your opinion on. So, the United Nations Human Development Report of 2004 said that when both paid employment and unpaid household tasks are accounted for, on average, women make more than men. So, right off the bat, that's face value. When I first read that, I was like, hmm. Like, I was like, okay, I can see that. But then it's like, how can you value work that's not unpaid? And it's like, I know maybe time. I guess time would be the only way.
Yeah.
Um, and I think this stat can definitely come from the huge fucking amount of single mothers out there. Like I was raised by a single mom. She fucking put in work and she made me who I am today. And um, I think those women are like amazing. And the men that left are fucking cowards. And they lose a lot of respect in my eyes. So I guess it's hard to think of that happening that much into like a full spouse household. Like how do you? Because I don't know. I guess what do you think about that? What do you think about that stat?
Like single mothers.
No, just like estimated that women work more than men. If you account, so let me read some more of it so you can kind of like have some more to talk about.
Yeah.
But um, So yeah, developing countries they're talking about. In rural areas of selected developing countries, women performed an average of 20% more work than men, 120% of men's total work. So an additional 102 minutes per day. So I guess they broke it up through time. And then they kind of go in. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, here we go. 5 out of 18 OECD countries surveyed: Canada, Denmark, Hungary, Israel, and the Netherlands.
Yeah, well, I think like if you saw a stat and it was like,
Oh, wait. Never mind. Men did up to 19 more. So these countries that I just listed, men work more than women.
okay,
So
well, I was just gonna say like if you saw a stat where it's like men like work more and pay more, it's like okay, well that's kind of the status quo. At
yeah,
least it was,
yeah,
contrary to popular belief in these times. But if you saw like a woman thing, it's like that's when like eyebrows start to raise. And I think I do if like the women like women work more, women make more. I don't think there's like it's like okay, well that's like if you said that with men, it's like okay, that's just a thing. Both women, it's like you have to like analyze it. If that was true, like
well,
I don't think that would be a big thing to talk about. Like if women make more and work more, yeah, that's what it is. I'm not complaining. It's
yeah,
true.
and I think women, I kind of want to agree with that. I think just from what I've seen, like I think, I mean, I guess I'm 20, so I haven't seen that much household tasks from women that are 20, like
Yeah.
besides like just keeping the fucking house together. That's not really, that's something everyone does. But when you get into like childbearing and just running a fucking house when you have a family, I think that comes down to majority women. And I think I remember reading in that political theory class, I forget the author, I think it was Oken, and she was a huge feminist, and I did not agree with almost everything she said. And I think she's the one that either she started or mentioned the 72 cents on the dollar, for men or women versus men. Um, but she talked a lot about the family and just kind of like work in the family and like unpaid work that women perform. And I mostly agree with that. I think a lot of the labor, I I think a lot of the things are performed majority by women in the household, and I think it's a shame that that can't be really accounted for payment. It can be accounted for in like just your family's wellness and whatever, blah blah blah. And I think men are spending more time in the actual paid workplace, and I think that's where you kind of see what these women are talking about. So if I get someone like Oken talking about that, I think I can kind of turn my head or turn my ear to that and listen. I'm more keen to listen about like these real things that I see in society. Like I feel like a lot of it's kind of ghost, just kind of like nonsense until we get to stuff like this.
Yeah, and I think like the whole wait like when you think of like the nuclear family, which is like degrading now, it's like the man is the breadwinner, the woman takes care of the children and cleans and stays at home. And some of that is like true. Like women are better nurturers. I would much value my partner, my female partner, to like take care of the kids and myself. Not saying I wouldn't be a good caretaker, but and like some Christopher Hitchinson, I think his name is. He said, he's like, I want my woman to stay at home. If she has kids, I want her to stay at home and work, and I'll bring home the money. And it's like, okay, well that's totally sexist, but if you just kind of stand back, it's like that's almost like chivalry.
Oh,
Like
and
it's
when
it
I hear
doesn't
that,
come
I'm
with
like,
sexism.
that's yeah, and I think it's bad to just label that as sexist. Like I think, you could view it through the lens of feminism and say that's sexist. Like in my fucking I'm just mentioning all my classes now, but like I hear a lot about this when I feel like I shouldn't. I feel like paying as much as I fucking do for college, I shouldn't be learning about like third wave feminism in an art class or something that I'm paying however much money per credit for. And my teacher mentioned third wave feminism and like the Me Too movement, like every other class period. I'm like, what are we talking about? This is an art class. This
Yeah.
isn't fucking social issues or gender studies. But what was I talking about? He, he mentioned it all the time. And I think, what were you talking about? I lost you. I totally
The
lost.
Christopher Hitchens men are going to be the bread makers when the women are taking care of the children. And it's
Oh,
more
yeah.
chivalry, not
Yeah, yeah,
sexism.
yeah. So, yeah, I was talking about he always used the word feminist lens. It was like a way to look at art. So there's all these different lenses that you could like view an art piece through. And he talked about like the feminist lens and like whenever we looked at stuff through the feminist lens, we were talking about the male gaze and like just these like societal like the nuclear family and like a man driving the car and a woman like putting up the kid's bow tie and making sure it's straight. Um, so if you look at it through that, like you're just gonna see something toxic every time. And if you want to see something toxic or if you want to see something like sexist, you're gonna find it. And same with Black Lives Matter. If you want to see something racist or if you want to see inequality, you're gonna find it because life isn't fair. And a lot of people are going to say like, "Oh, you can say that as a white male," but like either way, life is not fair no matter what gender, sex, race you are. Life kicks you in the fucking ass and you got to be ready to handle it. And if you're going to look at it through a lens where you find everything, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, I think I'm not discounting the actual like accounts of like sexism, racism, all that like intersectionality, but if you have to comb through it and look at it with a magnifying glass, it's probably not truth or reality. But going back to like the nuclear family and like chivalry, and it's when I say the man is the breadwinner when the woman has to take care of the kids, like paid leave, that's not in all ways. I'm not saying all women should do this, all men should do this. It's like, okay, women are better nurturing. Much rather have the women take the kids, and so if she's not working, then the guy's like, okay, well then I'm gonna make the money, and it's kind of like evolutionary positions. Like, and we're not like full blown animals, but like the female takes care of the kids, and the man goes out and gets the food. It's like it's not sexism. It's just you're just being more efficient.
Well,
Like
well, yeah, yeah, and I think looking at it through an evolutionary standpoint, that's been the case forever. And you could say, well, patriarchy's been here forever, and it's like, okay, sure, but I think there's some truth to that. I think thinking back to like, men having to go and fucking kill animals to get food for your village or for your family, I think that rings a lot of truth and um, kind of our biological positions. Like, obviously, most people are confident or competent enough to be in the workforce now. It has nothing to do with physical ability. It's very much a cognitive deal now with work. But I like just going back to like people saying that like it's just been a fucking millennia of the patriarchy. I think a lot of that has to do with just physical ability. I think a lot of the stuff kind of in early Europe and early tribes, that was all like physical labor. And we've kind
yeah,
of moved on from that. So you're kind of seeing that's why we saw the feminist movement so late, is because the only thing that really allowed like the cognitive to like advance in society was technology. You know, like before that it was all just physical skill, physical labor, and like I don't mean to come off as sexist, but men are stronger, just in general. Like in
yeah.
um, so I think fighting for women to be in the workplace more is perfectly fine, and I agree with that. But I think just labeling all of history as sexist is kind because like men going out and doing that wasn't sexist back when they were fucking hunter gatherer. It wasn't sexist, right?
Right. Yeah. No. definitely not. Like kind of looking at the past and saying like the past was sexist, and it's like I know back in the day, if women weren't leaders, if a woman tried to be a leader way back in the day, a guy would be like, all right, well, I control it. I'll just kill you or beat you. Like, what are you going to do about it? But I think today, it's like, especially with like Hillary Clinton, it's like the first woman president. And women today, if you want to run for office, like, I'm being specific to like the political sense. If women want to run for office, they totally, there's nothing, it's equal opportunity. There's nothing to hold them back. Just do it. And just like there's more men in like politics, at least from what I see in like
Well,
American society.
women make up more of the voting population too, so it's kind of hard to say that the society is sexist because they keep electing men, but women vote more than men during like almost every election. So it's like they're the one voting men in as well. So
Yeah, and
what's going on here?
I think it's going back to merit. So it's like, okay, well, the patriarchy, well, first thing, like hierarchies aren't solely based off power. Um, that's a whole other topic. But like, if we want equality, okay, that's all fine and dandy. But if a woman comes by and you're like, well, she's gonna be the first woman president, I'm gonna vote for that. For that, that's sexism. You're choosing a sex over the other just solely based off the sex. And it's like, if a woman wants to run for office and do all that, that's fine. Like, I want to hear about like what they're gonna do. I'm not being like, okay, well, am I gonna vote for the man or the woman? Um,
Yeah, and I
and
think
there's just a lot of leftist identity contradictions today.
yeah, and I hope that because I know that was a huge thing with this last election with Hillary, that a lot of women I don't want to no not a lot of women, but women did vote in Hillary just because she was a woman. And I want to excuse that just because it was the first woman that has been this close. You know, kind of like with Barack, like you're like, fuck, like this is the first black president. Like, can we just do it just for history, type of deal?
Yeah, yeah,
And I feel like the next time that comes around, that'll be less, and then the next time that it's less of a novelty and more like based on merit. Um, but like when I'm looking at like even before I was like into politics, I think when I was looking at like or hearing just like during elections the cycle, I wasn't like taking that into like taking that into any of my political leanings. I wasn't like, oh, she's a woman, so like I'm not gonna vote for her. Like maybe like unconsciously, but I can't imagine that. Um, like Amy Klobuchar, I respect her. She's Democratic. She's a respectable candidate. I think I'm not Democratic, but I think she would be a good presidential candidate, and I would have, voted for her way over Hillary Clinton, and like I would have voted for her over Bernie Sanders for sure
oh
if
yeah,
I had to choose. Like it has nothing to do with your genitals and it has everything to do with what you're gonna do with the goddamn country.
yeah. It's like diversity of thought, not like diversity of color
Yeah,
or
and
sex.
I think the diversity argument, like what you were saying, like it's just got so off balance where
It's gotten misconstrued.
yeah,
Like
yeah, like
I'm not bashing diversity.
we're valuing the wrong things, I think, especially in just like positions of power. We're valuing race and we're valuing sex when we think that like when they value that, I think that they're thinking that it includes diversity of opinion. When they say like we need more diversity in the campus, we need diversity in the staff and like gender and race, they think that all brings in diversity of thought, but a lot of the times it doesn't. Like I think diversity of thought is a huge just thing that we need in society, and I think while diversity of race and background and social economic status and gender all brings that, I think valuing those things over diversity of thought is wrong, you know, or
Yeah,
thinking that it brings that just right to the table when you have just like 50% black, 50% white, 50% female, 50% male.
yeah. Like back in the day, like if it's like a teeter totter, like a scale, it's like men were dominating it, and now this like it's like okay, well let's make everything equal, like true equal, like equal opportunity. But people are taking it as far as since they were tipping the scale one way, we have to tip it the other way, and it's like let's just make it equal, and it's like I don't think that's like a healthy. I don't think that's like productive. It's like because the scales are tipped one way.
Tipping it the other way.
Yeah, it's like, well, let's just make it equal. And I think it is equal now. Like if there's two presidential candidates,
and I think I think like societal or like, I guess not legislatively or nothing through actual laws. I think we're equal. The teeter-totter is even. And I think like socially it teeters back and forth, especially on different issues. I think there's a lot of things that, do teeter back and forth. And it's very tongue in cheek. Like I don't really know specifics of it. I'm just kind of taking into the fact that, there is stuff out there, whether or not we want to admit it, there is stuff out there, sexism, racism that does affect people on a daily basis. But, we got to take the right steps.
Yeah, I mean, the teeter can totter if it's intellectual diversity, but if the teeter is tottering solely based on like intersectionality and like diversity, like excluding thought, that's when they take it too far, and it's almost sexist and racist to do that. It's like, okay, well, females over males, like, is the solution to males over females, and I think it's still sexist and racist to choose a sex or a race over the other purely from that basis. It's like, let's have the teeter-totter based on intellectual diversity, not diversity of color or genitals.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Okay. I think we kind of talked that ad nauseum. We finished that one nicely. Any last things you kind of want to say about it?
I honestly think the teeter-totter is like the best. That's what I think of. It's like, it's almost like revenge, but
it's like reparations.
So it's like if it tips one way, then you have to tip it the other way. It's like, let's just tip it equal, and then intellectual diversity.
Well, yeah, it's like they bombed us, let's bomb them back. It's like we gotta take that moral high ground.
When they go low, we go high.
Yeah,
in the actual sense of the phrase.
Okay, so let's move on here. So we did the civil rights. We touched on Black Lives Matter. I think we talked about that. I just kind of get pretty redundant with what we've been saying. We talked about the feminist movement. So I'm looking at it here. We got pro-life. That's a huge topic. I don't know if we want to go into that right now. We have the labor movement. We have the environmental and green movement. We have anti-globalization movement. We have the vegetarian movement. Vegetarian, vegan, bro.
I would, like with environmental.
We talked about that in the last podcast a good amount.
Yeah, I know with vegetarian, like globalism versus nationalism, that is, I could talk about that. As far as like environmental, I think face value is a big thing. Don't just take things at face value. If you think the other argument is totally wrong, then maybe you haven't seen what the actual opposing argument like truly is. You think of it as there's something on the other aisle. If you think it is so blasphemous, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. Like looking at Europe from afar, like looking at it from a bird's eye view, you kind of feel everyone is like for globalization and stuff, just because it's fucking happening at a rapid movement, like rapid pace. Everyone's moving to Europe. Everyone is not assimilating. Things are going wrong. So when I saw like anti-globalization movement, I'm thinking like that's interesting to me right away, because I feel like if there were to be a movement today, it would be for globalization, just because we're kind of seeing that in today's politics with like the border wall and everything. But so this movement is specifically talking about people in Warsaw, Poland. They're basically protesting the EU in 2004, just the huge policies for globalization.
Like
what do you think?
Like one size fits all.
Yeah. What do you think? I guess generally, what do you think about the globalization that you've seen in Europe What do you think about, I guess I don't want to name specific countries, but like maybe Germany or France, and I know a lot of this is probably going to get moved to Islam, just because that's the majority of problems that we're seeing.
That's a whole nother podcast.
But just like surface level, what do you think?
Well, to start, I think it like when you think of like anti-capitalism, when you think of the anti, it's like okay, well then that's default like bad or incorrect. Like
Sure.
so, anti-capitalism is like nationalism. You don't really hear like anti-nationalism. You know what I mean? It's like
Anti-globalization, not anti-capitalism.
I meant nationalism. Like so, globalization, nationalism, like two sides of the spectrum.
Yep.
And when you hear like globalization, anti-globalization, it kind of like by default it's like okay, right and wrong. But if you look at like nationalism versus anti-nationalism, so I think like and people are like okay, well let's just get along, let's all work together. So globalization. But if you like I said, face value, you want to look a little bit deeper, and globalization one size fits all doesn't always work, and you can see that with
It almost never works.
like with Britain leaving the EU and like what's going on with like immigration, like Germany and like the France like yellow jacket protests. Um, there are some discrepancies.
Yeah, and like it's just crazy to think that like just all of the European Union just decided like let's just destroy. I don't want to say destroy, but like I feel like what you're putting at stake, especially in Europe, like especially in those countries where they just have like this huge rich history of just tradition and like all these like different groups of people like Irish people, German people, French people, they have these huge traditions. They have like, like what is it, the bull parade or whatever, like you run with the bulls in France and like blah blah blah, like Oktoberfest in Germany. Like I think while those things won't be at risk with globalization so much, like that would be more of a tourist thing. I think like going down, you're risking a lot. You're risking a lot just bringing in huge amounts of people that are not going to be like, I guess, respectful of, like, I don't want to say respectful, but like they're just not really going to assimilate that well.
Yeah.
Especially like people from like non-Western countries. Like they're going to come in with vast, like just hugely different political views, hugely different societal views, and like risking that is just to risk that heritage is huge.
Yeah, I think like the Judeo-Christian values, like aka the Western values, they're not very like synonymous with the people that are moving in now, and I don't I feel like immigration now. I don't want to like focus on immigration too much, but it they it's morality. It's like morality fantasy. So like if you want to let people in, it's like well we love all people. We have an obligation to help these people. Okay, well
I feel like, yeah, sorry.
it's not just it's there's not one single answer, and that's basically globalization. Um, I just think globalization needs to kind of and I know the leftists like talk about like local stuff, and that's kind of contradictory. But when you put a rule on a bunch of different cultures, and it's kind of amazing how Europe is kind of trying to, in a way, it's trying to be a United States with a bunch of different states under one banner.
Yep.
Maybe that works with the U.S., but with European, there's so many different cultures and stuff. One size definitely does not fit all. And by doing like the EU, like all that stuff, you're kind of stepping on the toes of the culture and the things that have been embedded there for so long.
I mean, you're really stepping on the toes of suburbs. I think no matter where you are, if you're in a huge city, I don't know, but in America, it tends to lean super liberal, super we love everyone. Um, it's definitely just stepping on the toes of people that are just in the suburbs and they just want to live the German life. They want to live the French life. They want to, go to the bar and do French fucking things or Canadian things, and then like just
Oui, oui.
shoving in a bunch of like Koreans or shoving in a bunch of like Saudis or shoving in a bunch of like Americans. Like no matter who it is, no matter what race or what way they look, like even like just how I said, like even Americans or like Icelanders or fucking anyone, Norwegians, like they'll find a way to like, get bothered by it. Like they'll like not saying like we need a fucking ethno state or anything, just like just valuing the culture that you like that your people came up with, your people are living, and like just not wanting to destroy it, you know?
Yeah, and I know like Nigel Farage was talking about how people like in relation to the European Union, how people in Brussels are making decisions about like Britain fishermen, and it's just it's like cultural
Say
like
that again. Say that again.
like Nigel Farage was talking about how European Union like shit's going on in like Brussels,
Yeah.
and so these bureaucrats are making all these decisions for like fishermen and how much they can't like. There's decisions going on in cultures that don't understand the culture they're enforcing upon, and I think that creates a lot of problems. Like I said it once, say it 1,000 times. One size does not fit all. And I don't think with Europe, I don't think the EU is, and if you try to be like, okay, well, the European Union is, it's not really beneficial. Like it's not effective. It's like, okay, well, you can take that any way you want, but you can't you can't take all these different things and just compile it together. I'm not saying I'm against like cultural diversity. Like a bunch of people can come in at different, like my neighbor can be Jewish, my neighbor can be this and that, but
Yeah, yeah,
but
just like a great like there is a greater culture. Like while there is cultural diversity and like cultural enclaves in each country, and like that's not an inherently bad thing. I think there's a greater culture just among like a way to live among each country or each region. Um, and like say if a bunch of fucking New Yorkers moved into Minnesota, like there would be they might all be white and we might all be white, or they might all be black and they might like no matter what race it is, like there's going to be problems, like New Yorkers versus Minnesotans, or like California people versus New Jersey people. Like there is different cultures, like greater cultures that just clash.
yeah,
And I think just valuing like those cultures and that there's differences and that like maybe just fucking throwing them together in a melting pot, like what we did in America. It worked kind of. I don't know yet. We're
it worked
struggling.
now. It took a while to work, but it's working now.
Yeah, I think it's worked greater like as a whole, and I think like there's obviously things that are lingering that like have not worked, like just with the political stuff today, but um, like I think just like focusing just on like I don't know, it's just like face value, disagreeing with these things, like what you were saying with face value, I think is like something I hadn't really thought about before. Like um, when you just kind of disagree with immigration, or disagree with like these people that are seeking refuge, or like trying to get to a first world country, or trying to do the best for their family, and saying like I don't want 3 million people from a third world country moving in here, like, or moving into my city. Like, on face value, that sounds terrible, but like, if you really look into it and like really just kind of like value, or I guess you really listen to what you hear and just kind of think about it yourself, you can kind of like get to the right side of it, or like I don't know. There's more to hear. There's more to listen to.
Yeah, and I know we might sound contradictory, like on the topic of diversity. It's like, okay, well, diversity is not good, and we talk about how diversity is good, but that like it's not like one size fits all. I know like if you threw a bunch of New Yorkers in Minnesota, it'd be like, oh hey, like excuse me, and then New York would be like, I'm fucking walking it. Like
Yeah.
there would be a big clash, but and like I'm not intellectually able to explain everything, but what's happening in Europe is not good, and like with everything that's going on, like there's something there's definitely a problem, and I think that's like the globalization. I think if you're gonna do globalization, I'm not like nationalism 100%, globalization 100%. It's like you can't look at it like that at face value. You have to find the perfect balance, and I don't think the balance is met with globalization in Europe.
Yeah, and I think Europe's kind of bouncing back. Like they did just a rubber band and they went fucking as far left as they could, and they're like on the brink of just completely socialist as like a whole European Union, and now they're kind of bouncing back. There's this big retaliation against it because they really saw what's going on, and they saw firsthand kind of like these policies in place. Like Americans today aren't obviously paying attention to that. There's not that much like world news. Like I don't know much about world news. Um, I just know broader things like what we've been talking about. But people today are fighting for like open borders. You know, like I don't know. I don't want to put words in Ocasio Cortez's mouth or Bernie Sanders. I know Bernie Sanders is against like open borders because he thinks it um, gives companies like free labor basically, which I agree with. I think like I agree with that for sure. But I think a lot of like people that lean far to the left are just like open borders. I think they're just trying to get votes. You know,
Yeah.
they're trying to pander to the largest audience possible, and it works. It fucking works. Anything in face value in politics works. So and like I'm looking at this like anti-globalization movement that was like specific to 2004 in Warsaw or something, and they were kind of um, fighting against the free movement across borders. I don't know if that's specific to Poland or specific to like just Europe. I know it's like easier to move across borders in Europe than it is from like US to Canada or US to Mexico. Um, and then like natural resources and a huge use of human resources, like especially like country resources, like just like
Like
if a
money.
country has a welfare state, you can just fucking move in there. Like that's a huge thing. Like I'd be for open immigration if we didn't have a fucking welfare state. I don't give a fuck if we didn't have a welfare state and I wasn't funding like not specifically me because I don't really think I'm contributing anything because I'm not making
Like we're
anything.
college kids.
Yeah, and like I'm not making anything, but on principle, like the fact that we're funding people that, and like obviously there should be steps for people that are coming in from a third world country and trying to adjust economically and trying to get like housing and trying to get healthcare and blah blah blah. I don't think a welfare state like we have today is something that we should be advocating for open borders with. Like we're basically just saying like, hey, we got welfare, come on in. Like it's insane.
Yeah. Like to go back, like you see, there's repercussions in Europe, and I think that is something to take into account because, like the legislators they make all these decisions, and people are. I know when you think of protest, like violent protests, it's yeah. I don't think violence is the answer. I mean, maybe sometimes, like if it shits in the fan, and
Wait
you
for what?
like
When
with
is violence the answer?
okay, I will tell you. I'll tell you the answer to when violence is the answer. So when people in the EU are making these decisions and they're just not listening to you, it's like okay, well, and you see this in France. It's like okay, if you tell a politician, be like, hey, well, we don't like this, and they're like, haha, whatever, fuck you, and it's like okay, well, the only way to get your fucking attention is to burn some cars and some buildings. And you see
Well,
this in France with Macron
yep.
actually like brought it like is actually having talks with the protesters. And I'm not saying let's have violence, but like the people there, they've had enough, and that's the only way they can get it out. And I don't want people to die or get hurt. That's the only way they can get it out. And Macron's actually talking with them. So um, sometimes like that's the only way because these people like you
I mean,
see
I don't think it was the violence necessarily that got Macron to kind of hear them out, you know? I think it was just the amount of people.
The
And the violence brought it to the news.
It helps.
The violence does help. But also, if you kind of flip that, like, it all just comes down to personal opinion, because, like, you could say the same thing with Antifa. You could say the same thing with Antifa, where they're basically communists or fascists, like, even though they're anti-fascist, they're basically fascists, in my eyes. They feel that same sort of contempt against what's going on in America. And, they resort to violence. You know, they say violence is okay. They're bringing, you know, AKs and fucking knives to these protests. And with what you saw with Proud Boys, I think you don't need to chase with that. I think violence, like, just, I agree with you.
I'm not saying violence is good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate to, like,
right, no,
saying that, like, if you're screaming at politicians, they're not doing what you want, you know, and, like, there's a ton of people that agree with you. I don't think that it's okay, but I totally agree with you with, like, your example. And I think I haven't really read into anything about the protests in France or whatever it was. So, but I was just playing devil's advocate. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm not well versed. I'm 20.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
like in a you know, just in America, but
obviously we don't know much about the EU, and I mean, not obviously,
I mean,
but
that was just our thoughts.
Yeah, that was broad thoughts on just kind of what's going on with globalization in Europe.
Some broad examples in Europe.
So we elected in Trump, thank God. And what do you think? He's obviously anti-globalization. What do you think would have happened? Or no, not what do you agree with what he's doing? Like, do you want the wall? Do you think what's going on right now do you think the wall's gonna happen, I guess, with Democrats coming into the House? We won the Senate, didn't we? We still have a majority in the Senate.
Senate's majority, House is now a little bit Democratic majority.
Yeah, like, we should not, if we lost the Senate, like, fuck our lives. Like, we had a pretty huge lead on the Senate. It would have been, we won Pete Stauber, I think. But anyways, so going forward into, I think, January, like, 12th is when they come into office or something like
when
that.
The newcomers come.
Yeah, when the newly elected come in, with a third of the Senate, and does the whole House get reelected every 4 years?
I'm not sure.
Anyways, what do you think's gonna happen upcoming with the wall? Do you agree with the wall? What do you think about southern border?
Well, I just want to address, like, why Trump got elected. I know it's Trump, so we're like, that's what people want to hear. Like, it's Trump, you know. I do think it in kind of a sense, it was like, we've had enough. Definitely not as much as, like, the EU, but I think it was just like common sense. Like, okay, well, we need a wall. You know, well, we need like we need a stable immigration system. I think that's what people wanted. They wanted, like, just straight up, like, okay, well, let's just have, like, the truth, not just some politician, like, speech for the masses. It's like, Donald Trump is, what you see is what you get. And it's like, yeah, he's big and racist. What you see is what you get. And I think that's what people wanted. They wanted someone, like, how you talk in a bar, like, someone straight up. Like, when you listen to it, it's like, it's truth. You listen to Donald Trump, it's like, holy shit, you just said that, but it's like, it's kind of truth. As far as the wall goes, I'd be down for the wall.
Yeah, and
it's not,
just,
it's
like,
not because I'm a racist or a bigot. It's like, I'm down for legal immigration, but people coming here illegally, that's just, you're cutting in line. It's a middle finger to legal immigration.
Well, and honestly, it is. It's a huge middle finger to illegal immigration or legal immigration, because going back to, like, that thing I mentioned with my uncle and me being in Australia when that Black Lives Matter took off. That's tough.
This is some and it's from Paris, France. It's straight Macron sent us this.
Grand Marnier, not
After
the best
after
thing to just drink straight.
yeah, after we threatened him with violence, he sent us this liqueur. Anyway, what were you saying?
Um, what was I saying? I was saying, yeah, middle finger to legal immigration, and it seems like kind of this fake outrage when I say it seems like I'm kind of manufacturing this fake outrage just because I'm very aware of that. Like I know that there's a lot of fake outrage out there, so whenever I see myself getting upset about something, I want to just be aware that it might be like my uncle tried to immigrate. He tried to move to the United States his entire life. Like he's from New Zealand. He moved to Australia. He moved to Europe. He moved to like England for a while. Um, but he never could move to the U.S. I think he got a green card for a bit. Not obviously, he had his kid here and his wife here, and it never worked out. So just the fact that if you're in Mexico, you can just fucking run the goddamn border or like come here and on a plane and just like stay here and just kind of sit it out and see what happens and hope that whatever whatever politicians are in place in your state or county or whatever are going to be okay with you being there. It's just a middle finger to my uncle. It's a middle finger to people in India that are trying to come here and they have like this big idea, or anyone from anywhere, honestly, that because I feel like I value like the amount I value legal, like I feel like legal immigrants, stories I've heard of legal immigrants coming here and just making a fucking just doing what they need to do and just getting ahead. I feel like legal immigrants value American policies and American lifestyle and just the way America is built with the Constitution so much more. And they value it so, like, just so much more than people that just fucking hop the border. And they're really, like, taking advantage of that and getting ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't harbor like true animosity towards illegal immigrants. I'm not saying they're all morally correct or morally incorrect. I know people are coming here.
Yeah,
I know.
sure.
No, I'm not saying you weren't against that. I'm sure there are people coming here just because welfare and like its benefits. But I think like with like refugees, like the rule is if you're a refugee in a country and they're killing you because of your religion or just they're just killing you, you go to the nearest like
Sovereign state.
that's like the rule. Like, okay, you get out of there. You
Yeah.
don't get to pick and choose, but people come here and there's a reason. And I know there's some who are just shitting. They come here and they shit on America, which is just oddly weird. It's like, okay, well, fuck you. You're still here. But like people are coming here for a reason, and this is my view. It's like, okay, and I'm not like this might seem like I'm characterizing illegal or immigrants in general as like a bad thing. But like, let's say you have a cut and you're bleeding, you're gonna sew up your cut before you wipe off the bleeding. And so I think that's like a weird comparison. But we close up the border, okay, we're mending the cut, and then you deal with the bleeding. So this is what I'm kind of believing. I'm not like well versed on it, but we put up the border, and then I'm not saying deport everyone. I think the illegal immigrants here path to citizenship, and it's like okay, we close off the border. We make sure we like contain our country, and the people who are here illegally, um, make them citizens. It's like they're already here, and I don't want to. Maybe some deportations, but
So
it's like
you wanna make people here are legally citizens?
I don't think you can deport all the illegal people. Maybe do it off merits. I don't know how the system exact goes about it, but you put the wall up because walls work. I mean the Berlin Wall, like the wall in Israel, it works. I mean, if you're in a house, why can't you get out of the house other than the door? It's because you have walls, and that's kind of a weird example, but
No, it's not.
walls work. Like a physical barrier works, but
Well, and
we close up the border, and then I think path to citizenship for even like for illegal immigration or immigrants. I think that might be a smart idea.
I think so too. Yeah, I think like saying like yeah, we sew up the cut and then kind of deal with the bleeding we have inside our country, you know. Um, and like just thinking about it now, I just like kind of just came to this, like, why is it so contested that we don't want like people just running across the border?
There's like a conceived or a conceived or perceived animosity. And it's like this is just the rule. You don't get to come in my house if I don't give you permission.
Well, like it just like looking at it from like I don't know, looking at it from the way I look at it now, like I just think like why like I know Trump has this huge like if you're not like obviously people that are Republican kind of appreciate how conservative um he's been like passing legislation and like being as a president. So I think conservatives are more keen to listen to him, obviously. Um, but I think like most presidents, and I know Obama wanted to fucking end illegal immigration and all that stuff with separating families started with Obama. And like I know there was all these things where it was like they were posting articles and it was about Trump's thing and it was like a picture with Obama. Um, I think I think it's just weird to look at immigration and just say like we need illegal immigrants. Like we don't. We don't need any illegal immigrants. We need to just if it's happening at the rate it is now, just fucking throw up a wall. Why can't we just stop that and just allow legal immigrants?
Yeah.
Just
Um, like if I can interject, I know Obama in his first term deported more people than Trump is now. It just and that's not saying, Obama Trump like bad versus good, but I think there is an animosity towards Trump. Sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not. But like I see bumper stickers that says all are welcome. And it's like, yeah, I get that. It's like it's the nice way. It's like the morally correct way to do it.
well, and
But
all are welcome legally. I
yeah,
don't give a fuck who comes here.
but there's like a line. If someone who's like, okay, like I think it should be based off like merit to some point, like to help us, because the point of, yeah, we want immigration, but we're still a country, and we want the most beneficiary to countries. We don't want to like be nice to those coming in, so it has less benefits towards those who are already here. We want benefits on both sides, and
Yeah.
I think illegal immigration. I think the wall's good. Close up the cut, deal with the bleeding, maybe deport some like actually some bad hombres, but maybe deport the criminals. But I do think there should be a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants here.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's definitely unfair. I don't want to say it's unfair, but it is to me it seems ugly to just deport people that have been here for a long time, you know.
Yeah,
It definitely is something I don't want to be a part of. I think if you're here, whether or not you got here illegally or legally, I think just to just send you back to wherever you came from probably not better than where you are now, to just kind of send you back. I think it's ugly. You could argue whether it's right or wrong. Um, but yeah, I agree with you. I think a path to citizenship is good, and I don't think just like openly just saying like everyone here is a citizen and just being like, um, I don't think that's the right move, but just giving them the opportunity, like giving everyone here the opportunity to do it. If you don't do it, you know, you're out.
yeah, yeah. I just think there's no animosity. Just close up the border. It's almost common sense. Like people come in who we want to come in. We want it to benefit both sides. Like I said, close up the cut, clean up the bleeding. I don't know. What are your final thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I kind of
Or
wrapped
I
up.
guess on everything.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of wrapped up final thoughts with, I guess, U.S. Immigration, but um, kind of our broader topic was just social movements. We really only touched on civil rights and feminism and Black Lives Matter, kind of a little bit, not really. Um, but I think like a lot of civil right, I guess civil rights in general in the 50s and 60s, we both agree with. I think kind of moving more in the 2000s, and there's a lot of like stuff that kind of just there's a lot more to it than what you think. So,
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts, like on um, the whole civil rights movement, it's look at how it actually compares. I think this whole podcast is about face value. Don't take things at face value. You want to actually research it, look more in depth, because there's more underneath like the water. There's more underneath the surface. As far as immigration, you want to close up the wound before you clean up the bleeding. Um, but yeah, we're not racist bigots.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no,
And I guess one final thing I thought of is just and I touched on it earlier, but I think the reason why the civil rights movement was so successful is because they were putting band-aids on real wounds, and they were like finding things that in society or like through government that was just not okay. These things were not okay that were happening. They were unjust, and they were fucking like pointing a magnifying glass at it and saying, "Look at this. Like, do you guys agree with this?" And I think a lot of the things now are kind of they're there's not many cuts left. You know, it's more just like a little bit of a bruise. You know, they're kind of like they're just pointing to a spot that doesn't have complete equity, and they're saying this is crazy. They're like comparing it to civil rights, and it's like let's look for real cuts. Let's look for things that
yeah,
we can actively work for in society, and I'll go with you hand in hand and walk towards you know uh a more just society. But we got to look for those more often than just kind of righting these wrongs that aren't that, I
yeah.
get, you know what I mean.
I think um, like the solution or the equation. If you look at the civil rights movement back then, like MLK to now BLM, back then it was black and white. Now it's gray, but we're using the same solution slash equation. I don't think it's comparable in that way. So, and I just go back to face value. Um, Yeah, and whether you, because I think and I vote red, but and I know like I have animosity towards the alt left, like
The alt
super
left,
identity
baby.
politics. But like we're all Americans, like let's figure this shit out together.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's close up all wounds.
yeah. Let's come together as a society and stop separating. All right, what was that? Episode 3.
Yeah, of the Bunk Bed Podcast.
All right. Good night.